Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, and hopefully we had a great Zoom. If you want to watch this early, you can, but today we're going to talk about solving quadratics. Solving quadratics. Let's see, what's the date today? 11/5. Quadratics, which is a fancy word for an x squared equation, okay? So because it's an x squared equation, there's always going to be two answers, always. I'm going to highlight that for you. Always two answers. Sometimes it might be the same answer twice. That can happen, but there's always going to be two answers. And sometimes there's even imaginary answers, which we're not going to go into, but always two answers, always. So if we take a look at example 1, I'm going to undo the square by square root. Remember, when we solve equations, we undo things by doing the opposite. So the opposite of a square is to take the square root. Okay, so then, you know, the square and the square root kind of cancel each other out. You get x equals, well, the square root of 25 is 5. But if we need two answers, we got to think this through. So if I have a negative 5, that will also work. And of course, if we plug that in, you can see that both answers, you can go straight to 5 squared, well, that's 25, but you can also go negative 5 squared, and that also equals 25. So you get both answers. So we get x equals 5 and negative 5. A little shortcut for that, I like to write like this: x equals plus or minus 5. I like that way to write that better, because then it shows both, but I don't have to write as much, right? So plus or minus 5 stands for the positive 5 and the negative 5, okay? Example 2, we can do this in one of two ways. We can either solve it or we could factor it, but may as well just solve it. It's just easier. So I'm going to go plus 49 to both sides, and I'll get a 4x squared equals a 0 plus 49 is 49. Divide by 4, right? 4's cancel, and I get x squared equals 49 divided by 4, and now I'm going to square root, right? Square root, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, square root. And that one's not too bad to square root, because we know it's going to be a 7 and a 4. So x is equal to 7 halves, square root of 49, square root of 4 is 2, and we know there's got to be two answers, so I'm going to say with the positive 7 halves and negative 7 halves. So I get both answers, okay? Number 3, we're just going to keep solving. Okay, so I'm going to go plus 54, right? And I got a 2x squared equals a 54. Divide by 2, x squared equals 27. Now, when I take the square root of 27, I'm going to get an ugly decimal, but I don't want that. What I'm going to do is do what we've been doing all week long, and so I'm going to break 27 down. Okay, square root, because that cancels the square, right? And now what I'm going to do is break 27 down into, and two answers, right? And two answers, but I'm going to break 27 down into 9 times 3, and I did that because that's a perfect square. We did this all of last week. So my answers are going to be plus or minus, well, the square root of 9 is 3, plain old 3, whole number 3, times the square root of 3. And those are my two answers. Both of them. I still have two answers, plus or minus, okay? Example 4, same way. I go minus 25 on both sides. 4x squared equals negative 25. I'm going to divide by 4. I'm going to have an x squared equals negative 25 over 4. And I'm going to square root both sides, right? But here's the problem. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. That looked like 25. You can't. You cannot take the square root of a negative number. Check it out. If I go square root of negative 25 divided by 4, not real. So this is no solution. So let's add that to our little notes. No solution. Okay, there you go. So let's add that to our notes somewhere up here. We're going to add that little thing. Okay, so let's add that. I'm going to add that in red. So we cannot. So we're going to have cannot take the square root of a negative number. Cannot. We can't do that. So let me highlight that. Okay. So then in this case, 2 answers will, but there are technically no solutions. So no answers. Right? No answers at all. Okay, example 5. Well, I'm going to go plus 1, plus 1. I got a 9x squared equals 1. Divide by 9, divide by 9. I've got an x squared equals a 1/9. I'm going to square root. Okay, because the square root cancels the square. Square root cancels the square. I'm left with just plain old x, but there has to be 2 answers, so I'm going to go positive and a negative, 2 answers. Square root of 1, that's easy. That's 1. Square root of 9 is 3. There's my answer, plus or minus 1/3. Okay. Example 6, piece of cake. Okay, same thing. Plus 1, plus 1. I got a 3x squared equals 75. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. I've got an x squared equals 25. Square root, boom, boom, right? X equals, now 2 answers, right? Plus or minus, 2 answers, plus or minus. The square root of 25 is 5 and negative 5. So you get 2 answers, okay? 2 answers, plus or minus 5. Okay, now turn the page and let's see what else I have, okay? Now, example A is unique. It's different because the 4 is on the inside. So what we have to do first is actually square root it, okay? So I'm going to square root both sides first because the 4 is on the inside, square root, okay? 4 is on the inside, so square root first. Now, I'm going to get the square cancels the square root, so really all I have is just x minus 4. I don't really need the parentheses because I don't need them anymore because the square's gone. But over here, square root of 81 is 9, right? But wait a minute, we have to have 2 answers. You still have to have 2 answers, okay? Still have to have 2 answers. So when I get the square root of 9, it's like a plus or minus 9. So to get 2 answers, I'm going to set up 2 equations. 2 answers, I'm going to set up 2 equations. So I'm going to have a x minus 4 equals a 9 and an x minus 4 equals a negative 9. Here's my positive 9. Here's my negative 9. Okay, and I'm going to solve. That's easy. Plus 4, x equals 13. Plus 4, x equals negative 5. So I get both answers. And I can check those answers. In fact, even if I check this answer here, this negative 5, 13 makes sense. 13 minus 4 is 9. Square 9, you get 81. But if you check the negative 5, you'll get a negative 5 minus 4. And then if we square that answer, sure enough, we get 81. So it will work. You get 2 answers. Okay, number 9, same type of thing. What we're going to do is go plus 27 first. Plus 27 plus 27. I'm going to have a 3 times an x plus 5 squared equals 27. Okay, just going to get rid of all the extra numbers first. Get rid of all the extra numbers around it. Got rid of the 27. Boom, it's gone. I'm going to divide by 3 first. Divide by 3. So then I have an x plus 5 quantity squared, because 3 is gone, gone, equals 9, right? 27 divided by 3 is 9. Now, we're going to square root it, and it's going to become a problem like this. It's going to be a lot like this one here. So square root it. Square root it. We know that the square and the square root cancel each other out. That's why we square rooted, was to eliminate the square. And we get x plus 5 equals. So let's see, the square root of 9 is 3, but there's 2 answers, right? 2 answers. Has to be 2 answers. So we're going to have a plus or minus 3. So now let's go to 2 equations. So we're going to have a x plus 5 equals 3, positive 3, and don't forget an x plus 5 equals negative 3. Okay, has to equal both. Equals 3 and negative 3. 2 answers, so let's go 2 equations. Minus 5, x equals negative 2. There's one answer. Minus 5, x equals negative 8. There's the other answer. Okay. All right, now, almost done. Example 10. I'll do this one real quickly. Again, at this point, we're just going to square root. There's no extra numbers, so I'm just going to square root, okay. And then the square, we'll get rid of the square root. Okay, so I got an x plus 1 equals 2 answers plus or minus the square root of 18. Now, the square root of 18 is not a very good number. It's just an ugly, irrational number, but I can reduce it, okay? Don't forget plus or minus because there's two answers. So I'm going to reduce it. I'm going to go x plus 1 equals, and if I reduce it, well, let's see, how about a 9? I need a perfect square, plus or minus the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So all I did right here is I took the square root of 18, and I found the multiples of 18, where one of them happens to be a perfect square. We've done this all last week. So then I've got an x plus 1 equals plus or minus, let's see, that's going to be a 3 square root of 2. All right, now I'm still not done. So I'm going to do finally is go minus 1, minus 1. Now, everybody watch. This is the biggie right here. You cannot add these. You can't because they're different. So you just leave it as negative 1. Here's my negative 1, plus or minus 3 square roots of 2. And those are my two answers, okay? My two answers are negative 1 plus 3 square roots of 2 and negative 1 minus 3 square roots of 2, okay? But it's easier to write it like that. Okay, and we'll talk about this specifically when we Zoom Thursday, okay? Tomorrow.